Hi all, I have an absolutely brilliant game to show you. This game is between Weiqi Zhou against Yifan, the top women's player in the world. So this was in the 2010 Chinese Championship. Let's have a look. So d4 from Weiqi Zhou, we have e6, inviting a French defense if white wants to play e4, d5, but we have c4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, and black now plays bishop b4, so this is the Ragozin variation, a cross between the Queen's Gambit declined and Nimzo Indian. So interesting perks of both systems. We have c takes, e takes, bishop g5, h6, white gives up the dark square bishop here. So this is an interesting set of imbalances for both sides. Sometimes white can use the outpost squares c5 and e5 quite well. Here there's also now pressure now after queen b3 concretely, it seems, on b4 and d5. So very interesting position. Black plays a really dynamic move here. I wonder if you can guess it. What would you play with black? A super dynamic move. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay, c5. This is very, very interesting. It's offering, first of all, a very dangerous gambit. Actually, you might notice that actually technically white could take on d5. Now white took on c5. If taking on d5, black just plays the very calm move knight c6, preparing actually after e3 to castle queenside after bishop e6 and castling queenside, and there's huge pressure here. White can never play d takes because a bishop takes c3 check. That would be absolutely lethal. And say this position, gaining a tempo on the queen, and carrying on like that, getting the pawn back, gives black a very, very nice, dynamic, aggressive position, actually, where black could even, this is a fictional variation, could even like push on the king side. So very aggressive opposite side castling scenario, which gives black technically the advantage. So let's have a quick look at that again. Queen takes d5, knight c6. Yeah, so this is just really quite dangerous. Instead of e3, that's the best move. Queen e4 check, this just is a disaster. Anytime d5 happens, that's a total disaster, if that's the intention there. So white has to tread really carefully here with e3. Yeah, just to replay this again, queen e4, there's no other real squares. Queen h5, you can get a true disaster in this variation with black castling queenside, kicking the queen with rook d5. And yeah, this is just absolutely crushing stuff. Taking here as possible, so there's tactics, a tactical storm, which is going to favour black. Absolutely winning there. So yes, it's a bad idea basically to take on d5 with the queen. So we have d takes, which is also kind of risky actually. The more solid way to play this is e3, but d takes c5, and now we have bishop takes c3 check. Now if white plays queen takes c3, there's actually just a miserable endgame for white. Even though a pawn up, black could just take here, and white's pawns are fractured, and just play knight d7, knowing that d5 is weak. So this is a kind of positional gambit for a very nice endgame after rook d1, knight takes. And here, okay, a pawn down technically, but look at black's pieces. That is a fantastic reinforced c5 square. This is super dynamic. And black could potentially just get the pawn back on c4 and hold that and be absolutely fine. So the endgame is nothing for white here after queen takes c3. So b takes c3 was tried, perhaps with the idea of playing knight d4 and trying to claim an advantage, because that looks like a reasonable square for the knight in front of the isolated queen's pawn. We have black castling, now knight d4, but maybe to the annoyance of Weiqi Zhou, Yifan played actually bishop e6, just offering b7. Isn't this a bit too cheeky? And yes, I mean, if this is allowed, it seems as though black's just going to play knight c6 and put a lot of pressure on white. So white went for it with queen takes b7. Yes, this does seem to neglect development quite severely. Is there going to be punishment? We have knight d7, so hitting c5. That's pushed. If queen b4 here, then simply rook fc8 and rook takes, that should be even. So this is pushed, rook a b8, gaining a tempo, offering another pawn. So 2 pawns down, really dynamic stuff. Rook a8, limited squares for the queen, queen c7. We have now knight e5. This is just really interesting position. e3, just to show some dangers here. If f3, you might think, hold on, is f3 worth consideration? Just maybe to put, king sometimes on f2, but actually queen f4 is really dangerous. Threatening knight takes and then queen takes c7. If knight takes here, protecting the queen, there's actually the nifty queen e3, and this is just deadly for white. For example, like this. We have this position with g5, very tactical line, threatening queen h4, checkmate. And here we end up with a scenario where the queen is loose on c7 and can be used like this to win that queen. So very dangerous to play an alternative f3 you might briefly consider. So e3, that looks the more sensible. And now we have rook fc8, queen b6. But now on queen d6, by the way, there's here there's actually rook takes c6 is possible. This is an amazing tactical resource as well. After knight takes, there's knight g4, threatening both c3 and f2. And say check and white castles, then queen takes c3 check, knight takes f2. Black's getting a big advantage here. White's king is not safe, and it's just very good for black. That's too dangerous, that continuation. So queen b6, not queen d6, and we have rook cb8, queen c5, and our rook coming to the 7th, threatening queen takes f2. So white is in a real defensive state here, defensive alert, with the king still in the center. We have f4 being played. On bishop e2, can you guess what can be played here? If I give you 5 seconds, tactical test, black to play here, what would you play? Okay, black could play knight d3 check, just dragging that bishop away so we get that common square of the queen and rook, and that actually ends up mating white. So knight d3, otherwise that's winning the queen if it's not taken. So that's a real crushing resource. So f4 seems desperate, but how does black punish this? Really superb move here, really fantastic move. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, black to play here. Okay, rook takes g2. Now if bishop takes, then there's again knight d3 check, forking king and queen. So here actually white castled queenside. So just to put some things on the board, if bishop takes g2, knight d3 check and knight takes c5. And if f takes here, then queen f2 check and queen d2 is checkmate. So white castles queenside. And now, with the knight hanging on e5, really brilliant game this, rook g takes a2. So the coordination of the rook should be enough, it seems, for a massive attack. Bishop e2. And let's just prove that now. If f takes e5, with some evidence at least, queen f2, very dangerous, bishop e2, queen takes e3 check, bishop f5 is a key move here, dragging the knight away, queen e4 check, rook a1 check, rook 8 to a2 check, and now queen a4. There's a very nice forcing sequence there. Wonderful stuff. If instead here, instead of bishop e2, knight e2, bishop f5 is pretty deadly, threatening rook c2. And yeah, that's just absolutely winning, for example, like that, winning the queen and shortly to checkmate after. So very dangerous scenarios indeed after rook g takes a2. So bishop e2 was played. Now knight c4, bishop takes c4. This weakens white, of course, on the light squares. D takes. We have now rook hg1, check, check. And after knight c2, rook takes d1 check, and the game actually ended here. White resigns here. So why did white resign in this position? Well, if king takes, let's examine king takes first. Then queen takes is crushing. Yeah, that's kind of weakness of the last move, neglecting c3. That's absolutely crushing. No time for white to use this pawn. White's just getting mated. f5 seals a mating net, taking away the escape squares. And then white's just going to get mated. And if rook takes, you might ask, rook takes, simply here, queen g6 is a way of putting pressure on that pin piece. Not queen f5, that would. But queen g6. And if rook c1, check, and here bishop g4 is an absolute killer, dragging the king away from things, but no, just to mate, not to win the knight, just to checkmate here on e2. And in this line on queen g6, if e4, that's futile as well, check. And taking here, there's enough time to do this. That pawn's not going anywhere because of queen f2 and queen takes c5. So for example like that, check, and then actually that's even, it doesn't matter about the queen, it's checkmate really, because the pawn's covering d3. So absolutely crushing stuff. Let's go to that final possession. So really, really dynamic stuff in this Ragozin variation. So this Ragozin has some underlying gambits as well, as this game shows with the c5 variation. It would be so dangerous for white to have taken on d5. Black had a super dynamic game. If you want to check out some interesting ideas in the Ragozin variation, check out this Kingscrusher TV / Ragozin link. There's an excellent interactive course at Chessable which has many, many ideas to arm you if you want to use the Ragozin variation, which is a fantastic cross between the Nimzo Indian defense and the Queen's Gambit declined. It really adds some spice, getting that early pin in the game like it was a kind of Nimzo Indian. So very, very interesting system to try in your own games. And you can just have a lot of free training there in that course. Okay, thanks very much.